Mm-mm-mm. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the next of our Essential series. I'm Lottie, founder of the Jura Society. We bring women wealth holders and their advisors together through education, connection, and collaboration across our three pillars of women, wealth, and well-being. Today, we are going to be exploring a world where academic landscapes are shifting rapidly and the stakes for future readiness have never been higher. So how can families make intentional, informed decisions about their children's education? Well, we're going to find out. As this afternoon, I'm joined by Ariana Azad, founder of Figtree Learning, as we explore the evolving dynamics of private tutoring, the myths and realities of elite academic pathways, and how to design a personalised education strategy that goes beyond credentials to cultivate resilience, confidence, and long-term purpose. So following a career in the city, Ariana established Figtree, a private education consultancy and tutoring business where she advises and services both domestic and international clients. As always, this is for educational purposes only, but if you do have any questions, please do pop them in the chat or reach out to myself or Ariana directly. So let me just get her in. We're going to enjoy this conversation. Hi, good afternoon. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Super. Bit warm, but not complaining.
Thanks for having me on this.
You're so welcome. I'm really, really excited about this conversation. And before we kick off, I'd love for you to share in your own words about what you do and why you do it.
So I run with a great team, a private, as you said, a private education consultancy and tutoring business. And we help families with finding the right schools and universities for their children, and also supporting them with any tuition they may require for entrance requirements or generally just subject-specific support.
Fantastic, fantastic. And then what actually led you to focus on this? I know you had a legal career, but how did you pivot into high-performing and high-profile families?
It's a good question. So as you said, I was in the city for almost too many years. No, but it was, and I was working in finance and knew that at some point I would want to pivot, because I initially started my career as a human rights lawyer at the UN and then turned to the dark side. But and then we had a friend who set up a charity for children in failing schools around Northwest London. And so he was a banker in the city, and he got a few of us together, professionals, lawyers, bankers, and we started helping out with these GCSE kids. And then I loved it and thought, this is it. So I started running the charity, running the program with the team, and then quickly knew that I'd want to work in education, and then started tutoring myself full-time for a whole year, working with different agencies and privately, and learning what they're doing well and what they could be doing better. And then that's kind of where everything started. I started bringing on tutors on board, and yeah.
The seed was sown. The seed was sown. I love that. So let's go back to how does education work in this sense? How do you work with your families? What is the service?
So we start with an extensive conversation with the families to find out what exactly they're looking for, what their goals are, and their time frame, and also hear a bit more about their children or child, and we go from there. So it really depends on if they're just looking for tutoring or if they're looking for a school or university, then the approach is slightly different. And if they're looking for entrance prep, then we always recommend an assessment to start with, informal in-person academic assessment, or online, because over half of our clients are actually abroad. And then we map out a plan for them going forward.
Yeah, and it's interesting there you say goals, because I think we all know that education is one of the most critical long-term investments that we can make. Do you want to expand on why that is in the current climate?
Well, the thing is, education has changed a lot, and as you know, and the world has become a lot more competitive, and there are a lot more options out there. So it's really, education is the foundation of everything, as we know. So not only academically, but also in terms of the confidence for the kids. So our approach is very much, and that also goes back to the background that I have, starting with working with kids and mentoring and tutoring them. So it all comes together as a more holistic approach. So yes, we have goals in mind, but we also need to make sure that the children feel that they can do it and have a structure in place and really nurture them throughout the process. So, and with all the options now that they have, it is, they're almost spoiled for choice. It is difficult to target. So when we look at universities now, children are looking at UK and European universities or UK and US universities. So it's all about being strategic from the outset.
Yeah, yeah. And the talent pool as well, I think setting them up for success as soon as possible, might seem quite intense for a lot, but actually when you're getting through that journey, it's making sure that you've got that resilience, both in terms of your psychological and academic background.
That's very true. So that's why we always recommend the sooner you start, the better. Not necessarily in terms of starting any tutoring or prep, but starting the conversation. And, we have parents that are starting from the age of 5, and that also depends on the child. So we really recommend on what's best for the family and to get to where they want. It's not a linear approach. It all depends on what they're looking for and the specific circumstances. So
yeah, well, absolutely. And I guess so in that sense, what trends are you seeing for how families are approaching private tutoring today in terms of preparing for competitive schools or global pathways?
Look, some parents are obviously more plugged in, and they're based here if we're looking at UK schools and universities, so they know a little bit more, but things are changing all the time. So schools assessments vary depending on the school, as most parents know, and they do keep changing, and universities now require assessments for most subjects. So it's just, in terms of the prep required, if I have someone who's looking at 11 plus prep and their child is only 5 or 6, I would recommend wait until your child is, in year 3, year 4, and then gently start from there, so that you're not in a, just to make it, because it's a stressful process anyway, especially for these little ones. So we want to kind of make sure that they're first comfortable with the material that they're covering, the syllabus, and then really push for because that's a different set of skills, prepping for the actual exam.
Well, that, and also, allowing them to have a little bit of playtime as well.
Of course, yes. But, I mean, the summer before any test is never fun, not for the child, not for the parents. So that's why the tutor that will work with the child is really important, because the child needs to have that connection with the tutor, and nobody wants to be tutored, right? I mean,
but I think that's what's the was it the Greeks, pedagogy, and having this almost mentorship, I think, is so important. And where you do your matchmaking, I think, is what elevates that experience, and making sure that it is aligned with the child's capabilities and abilities, and how is that part of like the main essence of how you guide the families through this competitive landscape, or
absolutely. I mean, what's most important is to be flexible and open-minded. So that works both ways. And we can only introduce tutors that we've trained in-house. And I actually recruit every single tutor myself, because it's not just someone who's they've all done exceptionally well at university. Everyone now does, by the way. So it's, and
the bar is raised.
Yeah. So it really has to be someone who genuinely cares and is invested in the process. And that can also change over time. Kids are, especially with the younger ones. So, just being adaptable and being, we support our tutors as much as we support the families throughout the process. So it's not just introducing them and, and that's it, because they need both, it's a collaborative approach, and we work as a team. So rather than working, yes, of course we work for the client, but most importantly, we work with the client and their child And
Well,
as they
that's
progress, we monitor that closely.
Is it particular subjects or is it an overview in terms of or do they select, would it be like, okay, they need a bit of a boost in sort of like maths and English, or they just do French, or is it sort of the whole syllabus depending on their age? How does it work? Or is it just
It all depends on what
yeah,
we're looking at. So
yeah.
if we're talking about subject specific, so let's say it's GCSE support, then they might just need a few sessions just to kind of fill some gaps or feel confident before an exam. Or it could be, our thing is that our relationships tend to carry on to throughout a child's journey, which is really nice. So some people, obviously, that you can't have one tutor covers everything from year 3 to year 11. So but that's also how we've grown, or very much organically, meeting our clients' demands. So we started off as a tutoring business, and then clients would ask, can you help with the 11 plus and the next school, what school will be right? And then we get to university, what should they be preparing the SAT or the ACT, or should they be preparing for what universities would they be? So it's a journey, and that's how we have grown. So
Well, and I think as well, given your insights, experience, and track record, there must be a lot of myth busting that you have to do for parents in terms of expectation management. Are there any common misconceptions that these families have when it comes to choosing the right school?
Okay, so we're very empathetic to the stress that parents and children particularly are going through, especially because things are so competitive, and everybody who can is getting tutored. So you've got to keep up with that. So you have your child at a private school, and yet they need to be tutored because the private schools also need to cover a syllabus, and they don't have the time to really prep for every single test. As I said, every test is almost different now. So we're very transparent in our approach. So when a family comes to us and says, I'm targeting these schools, and often they're always, certain schools, then we do always say, look, you need backup options. No matter how brilliant your child is, the next child is brilliant too. So, and it's not just a test they're prepping for, it's an interview, it's, the reference from the school, the report cards, it's the whole. So we're very honest from the outset and tell the parents, this is, if you want to get your child in, this is what you need to do. And then it's really up to them to decide how they want to approach it. And yeah, if they want, and also we always tell parents the biggest successes we see are those where parents are involved. So you can't just outsource everything. It doesn't work because there's homework involved, and yeah.
They want to know the child's supported as well, and that they're not just being sort of dropped at the gate and go, okay, good luck with that, I'll see you in 5 years.
Yeah, and also there's homework involved, right? So we only come in once or twice a week if we're talking about school entrance. So that needs to be done outside of it too. So we can only tell parents, this is what this child is doing, prepping for St. Paul's. So your child needs to be doing at least that too. So
yeah.
But yes, and back to your question, there are so many great, if we're talking about schools, so many fantastic schools in and around London and the UK. So, we always tell parents, keep an open mind, and, your child is ahead of the game anyway, if they're lucky enough to be at a private school. That's what we're talking about, and getting private tutoring, and start early.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and also, I just wonder, sorry, this is off the cuff, but are you seeing a sort of a demand for Brits to go abroad at all, or even, because there's been a bit of an exodus, as we know, are you seeing any other hotspots in a global education perspective?
So I'm going to be really honest here. Yes, a lot of people talk about moving, and yes, people have moved, but people are still coming. I mean,
yeah.
Since January, most of our inquiries are from the US for different various reasons. Some of them have British connections and some of them have none. And, and then also we have Brits that are moving to Portugal and Spain and want to move to Milan and Dubai. But, it's yes, we help with all of that, with the transitions, and we have, we know schools, particularly in the Middle East, very well, and we have, contacts in Europe, but there are not that many options, to be honest. So you're very limited, especially when you go to Europe. It's international schools. When you go to the Emirates, they have a lot of British schools that have now opened out there, and there's a very common misconception that they're as good as the schools here. They're not. It's a lot of marketing.
Branding. Yeah.
It's and explaining that to families coming from the Middle East when they say, but I've had my child at X school. Any child coming from abroad is always behind any child in the UK. It's just a different quality of teaching, quality of competition. It's just a whole. So explaining that, saying, look, any child is 6 to 12 months behind coming out of the UK, and particularly from Dubai, we're seeing them at least 12 to 18 months behind.
Wow.
So it requires a lot of forward planning, tuition, and just,
Or strategy, as you say.
Yeah, it's all strategy. So navigating that. And then, it's a journey with the parents as well to get their head around, because we understand they've been paying these fees abroad, and then they have to come and realize that actually, no, you can't just transition easily.
Well, this is an interesting thing, because I guess, as you say, it is about matching the child with what is right for them. But are prestigious schools, these sort of like big name schools, or universities, are they always the right fit? Or do you sometimes advise your family to think a bit different?
They're not. No, they're not. And we can only advise parents on that. So we try our best we have to be honest. That's our responsibility. So, they're not. And the right fit for each child is the most important thing. We have kids that, we've helped with St. Paul's, Eton, and they're academically at the top of their game, but they come to us and say, look, we're not happy, right? And they don't fit into the environment. And these kids are really smart these days. They know what they want, and they know what's right for them, and they want to switch schools, and then they do really well. What's most important is doing well. So get your top GCSE grades, get your top A levels or IB or whatever it is that you're doing, and then you can go anywhere rather than be at X school.
Yeah. There's no point in having the good brand if you're not A, happy, or B, performing. It's just, it's a waste of your life.
Yeah, I mean, we also had a family, and they said, look, if our child doesn't get into St. Paul's or Godolphin or whatever, we might as well just move back to the US. And we said, okay, fine, super bright kid at a top prep school. And we had to, we said, if that's the case, you're going to have to do X amount of tutoring. It's just, and that much work outside. They did it. She had the option. She got into all of them. She didn't choose St. Paul's. The child didn't, and the parents really struggled with that initially, but she's flourishing.
Good.
I mean, she's gone to Godolphin, so it's not like a big, but parents are really hung up, and I get it, but
I think that's also possibly some of the challenge for you is the parents allowing the children agency over their destiny somewhat.
They have to be a part of the process. The kids have, for this to be successful, they have to see the schools that also gives them that motivation. And point is, we never say no, nothing is impossible. Some things are, if you come to us 3 months in advance, you just move over to Spain and English isn't your first language, you want to go to St. Paul, it's impossible. But, nothing is really that impossible, but it's just about, you don't know who's going to interview on the day, what the child's going to be like on the day. We had one kid, he had interviews at every single school, and we kept telling the parents, you need to prep for the interview. Didn't get in anywhere. So it's just, we see this all the time. And it's the same with universities. We have 4 A-star kids that are going for Cambridge and, you name it, Harvard or whatever, but kids that are going for these schools are 4 A-star kids, right? So, and you need to be prepped for the entrance tests, you need to be prepped for the interviews, but they just kind of rely on just, oh, my child has 4 A-stars and 11 nines, and that's it. They're going to fly it. They're not. So,
well, that's what's quite interesting, is then you've got the market for work experience as well, and making sure that they're maximizing their time and their school holidays to get these extracurricular activities fitted in, and making sure, if they want to go into IB or banking, that they've got those connections in order to facilitate some kind of value add to their CV when they're applying to anywhere, which is quite tricky in a saturated market, particularly in London. But how early would you recommend families begin planning if they are targeting these Ivy League or Oxbridge level institutions? I know.
So in terms of American universities, obviously you need to start 3-4 years in advance, because you need to really, get your profile up in terms of extracurriculars, charitable work, sports, music, all of that matters. And then, of course, even though they say SAT, ACTs are optional, in reality, they're not. If you've been at a great school, then, you really need to be scoring at least 1500, 1550 on these exams. So it's, and even then, if you're not American, if you're not an athlete, there's so many factors, right? So you do need to prep far in advance. Again, there's so many fantastic schools that aren't necessarily Ivy Leagues. And then there's always a postgrad as well. So we always urge parents to have an open mind and have backup options, and just, and then in terms of Oxford and Cambridge, I mean, yeah, your starting point is get the best, or
Great.
Imperial or LSE, get the best GCSE grades. We do also have kids that don't get all nines and they get into, Oxbridge, Imperial. It just matters that they get those nines in the subjects they want to study and have as flawless as possible of a CV. But then when they get to prepping for the actual interviews and applications, it's a lot less about your extracurriculars for the UK universities and a lot more about your interest and knowledge of the subject that you want to study.
Well, that's interesting. And I suppose also it would be that balance of EQ and IQ.
Yes.
And that for some students might be a bit tricky, maybe they're a bit neurodivergent, they might be really anxious, and actually performing in an interview might just be the most horrific thing for them personally. So do you also help them with how to get themselves in the right mindset to actually deliver their best shot?
Absolutely. So we do help. It's also, a lot of it is about maturity and, being able to, these universities in the UK, when they interview the kids, it's more about how they think and how they approach the questions, how much they know. So beyond just that specific topic. And it all depends on who's interviewing you as well, right? And so many different factors in the criteria that they need to, meet internally. And then how that we have so many great kids that apply and we think they are fantastic, but they don't get in. So, it's not, you're competing with fantastic pool, and a lot of it's a pentathlon, right? There's so many things that factors involved. So it's you can't bank on just one thing. It's not gonna, no matter how brilliant your child is, it's not. And also you need to trust the process a little bit. These schools and universities are really good, this is what they do, at choosing the right candidates and knowing who will be a right fit. So that's also a big part.
Well, yeah, it's their reputation, isn't it? They need to churn out the best to maintain their reputation. One thing I think, I'm curveballing you again, we can't talk about education without talking about the impact of AI and ChatGPT and all of these wonderful things when it comes to examinations or coursework and things like that. A, what are you seeing? And B, what do you think some of the challenges are moving forwards for students in terms of how they are doing research, and just their general format for learning, I guess, because we're all kind of adapting, aren't we, to technology in the way that we hold, store, and deliver information.
I mean, that is a curveball, because to be honest, so far we haven't really seen. A lot of this is a tool and an aid for the kids, and the kids that we work with are genuinely, super smart, and they know how to use AI.
Yeah.
So, and they're not trying to cut corners. The ones that are trying to cut corners don't make it. So it's, they just know how to use it as a starting, just to kind of, they know how to ask the questions.
Yeah.
And they're fully aware that the schools and universities know when we can tell, right? So, that's too much, right? That's too obvious. So I think, and they take pride in their work as well. So it's not, I think we need to trust the kids as well, that they're really smart and ambitious ones know that they can't be relying on AI.
Yeah, I think that's healthy, and actually, as you mentioned before, it's having those critical thinking skills, which is what will set you above and beyond
Yes.
machine learning, and that is sort of like the innate human wonder, is that we have the ability to think, okay, that doesn't look right. Let me go and figure out what was happening before that, and that's what sets these kids apart.
Yeah, and AI is only useful to them if they know how to ask the question and what they need. So if you don't, then if
Yeah.
you're purely relying on AI, then you shouldn't be prepping for the top schools. It's not going to
Yeah.
work.
No, well, exactly. And actually, it's all of those EQ things that AI is just not going to get as well. So
Yeah.
how do you deliver that information?
And again, these top universities are looking for creativity, especially when it comes to universities. That's what they're not, the questions they ask are really not, they're looking for kids that really know how to think outside the box.
Yeah, there is no box.
Yeah, exactly.
So what advice would you give to parents looking to future-proof their child's education in what is a bit of an uncertain world?
Look, my advice to parents is just start speaking and getting advice early on. You don't necessarily have to start engaging and taking action. I always tell parents, when I have parents in panic, I'm like, okay, let's just take a breath. Like, let's just see and where we are and start from the beginning, and then kind of build on that foundation. But so the most important thing is to start thinking and talking early on to professionals, preferably not to people that are, peers. They can stress you out, and
Yeah.
people always come and say, somebody said X and the other one said that, and it's just, everyone's kind of, it's a bit,
Got their opinion.
and then it turns into chaos and panic. So I would just, plan ahead, start the conversation so that you can do what you need to do at home before you start engaging, anyone professional. And then, so that you're in a position where you can slowly start preparing. And if you need to engage someone, if you realize that your child needs some help in maths or in English, or they don't like to read, or their maths GCSE or English isn't going that well, then start engaging someone, not necessarily panicked, but once a week, slowly, and build on that, and then see where it goes, and keep an open mind. So, keep your Ivy Leagues and your St. Paul's and Westminsters there, but also look at other options. So.
Yeah, and come to somebody like you who's actually got that experience in both navigating the system, but also the connections to allow the parents to understand exactly what is required, and then it's up to them to work with the child and yourself to deliver that as best they can. What do you think some of the trends are then, in terms of admissions? Are there any particular trends? I know we've covered a bit of that, but
in terms of university or
university.
So, I mean, the trend really in terms of admissions, if we're looking at the US is a whole different story right now, especially. So if you are American, you obviously have no concerns, but as such, but we are seeing that kids are still really keen on going to the US, just because a lot of kids now they can't decide what they want to study. So they have different interests, and they understand that the US gives them that opportunity. So we are still seeing that kids are applying, but they're also applying to the UK now and Europe. So these are really, Europe has become hugely popular, especially Italy, Spain, and all of that. So, but it's really important that we look at the courses and the kind of program that a child is looking for. So if a child needs more engagement and direct contact with their professors, Europe might not be the right option, if they're looking for more guidance, and then America might be. It's just the trends in terms of admissions is simply everything just gets harder year on year. So the only thing you can do is be in the best position, and that requires advanced preparation. So I know that's not very helpful, but
no, but it is, and I think sometimes it's just reinforcing the importance of doing something in advance, because it is a serious, consideration for both the child and the families, and you want to do it right. So
yeah, so we take things in stages as well with the family, just to break it down, because does become a minefield of just navigating different systems and requirements. And so we do try to say, okay, this is stage one. So we break it down for them, so that also it relieves pressure off of them and the child as well. So, and we really try to, the child needs to be a part of it. I can't reiterate that enough as well. So we need them on board.
Yes, well, exactly. Yeah. There's nothing worse than a child being forced down a route that they don't want to go down, because then they'll just become resentful, and the stress will probably just crush them, possibly.
No, and they need to understand that if they want a certain thing, then certain things need to happen, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, exactly. But yeah, taking the horse to water, can't make it drink, but you can make the water as appetizing as possible.
Yeah, so we try to make the process as seamless as possible for the family, for the whole family.
Yeah, I love that. So just before we wrap up now, A, is there anything that you would like to add? But B, what are your 3 top tips that the parent can do today, whatever age their child is?
Well, I think it depends on what age the child is. Yeah. So I always tell parents the most important thing for a young child is to read. Most importantly, a lot of kids don't like to read. I understand that. So let's.
And an actual book, or would you go Kindle? Do you have a preference?
I mean, that's an interesting question, and we do say Kindle is great only because vocabulary is such an important, factor. So they can just click on the word, and then it gives them, it gives them the meaning. So that really helps. But I understand that a lot of people like, old-fashioned book reading. So whatever, just read. And however old your child is, just read to them. Take that time, even if it's just 10, 15 minutes a day. And as long as it's consistent, and if you have a reluctant child, which is also very normal, just make them read a few pages a day. It's just really important also for, like you were saying, critical thinking, understanding, writing. All of these things are super important. So when they're young, they need to read, they need to know their times tables, they need to, all these things.
I remember in the car with my dad on the way to school, we would have one of those tapes, and it would be like 1 times 1 is the, and I hated it, but he would be like, you're not getting out the car until you've done this.
So,
and it worked.
And then if your child doesn't, no child really likes to work with their parents. So we have some families they work with, we have some families say, I don't believe in tutoring. I'm like, that's absolutely fine. But if you're working with them, that's tutoring too. So that's great. So just, whether you outsource it or do it yourself, just engage. Don't rely on just outsourcing. That's a big, do a little bit of that. And we can always guide on what you need to be doing as well. It's not a lot. It's just about consistency. And then, and if your child is older, just identify where the gaps are and just try to kind of deal with them right away, because it can really affect their confidence. So, if they're feeling like they're falling behind in something, a few sessions can really fill that. And so we can help with that. And just give us a call, and even just an informal chat. I have conversations all the time, and we enjoy it. So it's, we get it, and it doesn't have to lead to anything, but just call and we'll talk you through it.
So, no silly questions.
Absolutely. And everybody's doing it. So there's no, I always tell parents, if you're able to and you have the resources, use them. So,
well, as we said right at the beginning, it is one of the biggest investments you can make in your child's life.
Absolutely.
And the most important. And it's something no one can take away from you.
Yeah, absolutely. And our real goal is just help you get to where you want to get to. And like I said, in the most, in the least painful way for everybody as well, and maximize on the child's potential. Really.
Yeah. So, I love that.
And we're tough, but we're kind. So we try to balance that all the time.
You've got, I think that's also super important, having structure, having consistency, because once you get into the real world, it's on you to develop that. And if you don't have those skills early on, it can be a little bit hairy.
And also another really important point that we haven't touched on is special needs. So there's a lot of that. And again, there's not, children, every child is different. It's just nothing is linear. The process doesn't need to be linear. No child is, one profile. And so we're seeing that all the time. So we work with educational consultants all the time as well. And just important for parents to feel comfortable that they can talk about it because everyone else is. So
yeah, I think that's it. And having conversations like this where we're bringing it out into the general domain to say, it's good to have these conversations.
Yeah, and I'm not the one that necessarily can answer all that. That's why I bring in different teams, and we work with excellent special needs teams, US college teams, UK university teams. So it's just all about bringing in the right experts to really help. But
no man is an island.
Yeah, exactly.
We all have to work together. Well, I have really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much, Lottie. So have I. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing it, and thank you to everybody who's tuned in to watch us. Again, as I mentioned right at the start, if you do have any questions, reach out to myself or Ariana. And if you're watching this on the replay, hello.
Great questions, Lottie. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for answering them so comprehensively and taking my curveballs. But yeah, thank you, and looking forward to seeing you really soon.
Me too. Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye.